Evening, everybody. Glad that you're joining us here tonight to discuss what I think is really quite a great topic of discussion, and that is why should white folk watch black movies? This is a really important discussion, one that I'm really excited about having with Pastor Curtis Dunlap, who's joining me here tonight from Philadelphia. This is over 200 episodes we've had with Warp and Woof Radio. We're really pleased to be able to bring these to you. This is the kind of thing that we want to do, introduce folks to each other, and then to expose the kinds of stories that we need to talk about, which is this one tonight. Very, very important topic of discussion. So again, Curtis, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, this is going to be great, man. I've been waiting all day for this. This is just going to be super. So just give us a little bit of a bio. Tell us a little about yourself, your church, your family.
Yeah. So again, Curtis Dunlap. I'm live in Philadelphia, or right now I just moved back to New Jersey. I grew up in Jersey, but spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. I am one of the elders at our church that oversees family life. And so I've been there since we launched the church in 2006, me and my wife. Just celebrated 13 years of marriage this past Sunday.
Nice.
To my beautiful wife, Courtney. We have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. And so, I mean, I'm a very, very incredibly blessed man. Family ministry, the Lord has just been an incredible blessing to this raggedy old guy who's headed nowhere fast.
Well, one of the things we were just talking about before we came on air was one of the things that we have in common. Why don't you talk just a minute about that?
Yeah, When we first met, I was a little, you being one of my professors, I saw the syllabus and I said, oh man, I don't know about this guy, but man, your love for movies and, when we sat down at the house and had dinner together and we were just kind of talking about films, and it let me into a little bit about who you were and what you valued. And, I was beginning to learn some things about you that I know I wouldn't have necessarily learned in the classroom. At the dinner table, as we kind of discussed just our love for film and different genres of film and the meaning behind some of the films that were made. And so it's a huge way to have great conversation.
It is that. Yeah. One of the things I think of immediately about those kinds of things is, so many people have book clubs. I wondered sometimes if we might have movie clubs.
Yeah. Listen, I'm all for it.
I think we ought to be starting one on our own. What do you think? What do you say?
Listen, you find a lot out about somebody based on what movies they enjoy and why they enjoy them.
Isn't that the truth? Oh, that's great. Well, let's just jump right into it. And one of the things that you and I were talking about, one of the wonderful things I think that you were talking about just as we started before the show started was the opportunity to actually talk about representation. So talk a minute about the importance of representation.
Yeah. I mean, you asking that question is almost sort of, where do I begin? Because do I go through the whole, history of slavery and entertainment and all the various things. But I guess to keep it short, people place value on what they see. And, even studies have shown that what we see and what gets shown to us in particular ways begins to create a narrative of how we define beauty, how we define truth, how we define love. And so when we talk about this idea of representation in film, for a very long time, people who looked like me were not allowed to be in film, or were not allowed to be cast in particular roles. And so not only is that damaging for African Americans and Latinos and Asians and other people of color to not be able to see themselves represented as beautiful or as worthy of love, or in or just having normal jobs without being dysfunctional relationships. But it also does a very great disservice to my Euro-American friends and brothers and colleagues, because it paints a picture of and a caricature a lot of times of what people who look like me are actually like that may not be true.
Yeah.
And so then when you come in contact with somebody who's like me, you already have a preconceived notion. You already have a built-in definition of what I'm like, what people like me are like, because you've been taught what we're like, not by being in relationship with us, but based on the caricature that's been told to you over the years.
Man, I'm telling you that those sentences right there that you just uttered, that's the beginning of an essay you need to write. I'm just telling you right now. That thing needs to be published, honestly.
Listen, I know there are probably people who could probably formulate what I feel so much better than I could to make that argument.
I don't know, man. This is going to be archived now, so you just need to go back and take all those words and put them down, man. That's great stuff. Well, we've got some folks showing up here, so I'll just put those up from time to time. Here's Dan, starting a study center here in Indiana. Just happy to have him joining us here tonight. Thanks, Dan, for being here. And I know that a lot of the folks that are joining us here tonight are folks that you know in your church, so we're welcome those folks as well. Yeah. I wanted to make sure to start off this evening, aside from what we've already said and your good words so far, wondering about this cultural moment that we're in with the murder of George Floyd and its connection to history, the importance of not forgetting where we've come from and how we got to this time and place. And maybe, since we're talking about movies, to kind of segue some films in there that would kind of explain or at least come alongside some of what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah. Man, it's so loaded. Even discussing just sort of what's happening in the world right now currently, especially with George Floyd and obviously Breonna Taylor was the week before, and then Ahmaud Arbery was the week before, and so it's been like kind of back to back to back. And even with those three individuals and how they tragically were murdered, a lot of the protests and even looting and rioting that we see are not just about those three. There's been a lot bubbling underneath the surface for a long time in African American communities when talking about the systemic injustices that exist, the oppression and the lack of opportunities that exist, the regular occurrences with law enforcement that exist, that kind of have almost kind of culminated at this point now. And this isn't the first time, obviously, throughout history, we've seen protests and marches and riots occur on this particular issue. But I think we're at a very unique place, especially during the era of social media, where there's so much more captured in time because of cell phones that prayerfully, hopefully, allows us to be able to expose, some of the things that have been going on that if I can be honest, a lot of people haven't believed African Americans about. You know?
All of that matters. Some of the things that I think about in relationship to that are some of these historic pieces, the biographic pieces of history that we've really only just seen, let's say, in the last decade, probably even in the last 5 years or so. And I'm thinking about movies like Jackie Robinson's 42,
absolutely,
or Jesse Owens' Race. We're getting to see now some of the great stories of great men and women of the past. I'm thinking about Hidden Figures, for instance, the great story about those mathematicians in NASA, African American women. Wonderful stories, and this kind of threads all of what you've already said about representation, the necessity of understanding what's been going on beneath the surface, the need for white people to see these kinds of lives. This is really important.
It is. And, it's funny that you mentioned, movies like Hidden Figures and 42. And, you can even throw the recent movie, The Banker, in there, which is based off of, some factual elements. But, as an African American, I personally, and I know I don't speak for everybody. I'm not a monolith for all African Americans, but there are moments where I get really tired of watching those movies, and it's fatiguing to watch those movies a lot of times, because it seems like a lot of the movies that get made that we're allowed to be in, where we're allowed to be represented, is the movies surrounding civil rights and the struggle, and so some of that fatigue that I feel comes from just wanting sometimes to watch a movie where we're not talking about racism, where we're not talking about the struggle of civil rights, because the Black experience, the Black life, is so much more than that.
Yes.
So I think that's even one of the deficiencies of Hollywood and movie watching and films. Is if you only get this picture of the Black struggle and civil rights, then even still you have such an incomplete view of the Black experience and what our lives are like, and what it means to just be a father, to be a husband, to be a student, to be a banker, to whatever the case may be. And so, it can be exhausting at times. Like, I haven't even watched the movie Just Mercy yet, which is another one of those movies, right, based on the book by Brian Stevenson, because my soul is just not in a place to be able to carry the heaviness of watching that yet again. And so, it's interesting. I not saying I can't watch it and they aren't great movies. But as an African American, at times it does become tiring when those are the only movies that seem to be available to watch with me in it.
One of the things that strikes me as you say that is honestly the mood or the frame of mind. I don't know how to describe this for myself. Maybe you can speak to this issue, but it takes me a long time sometimes to watch a movie because I know what the movie's about.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes me a year before I don't even want to watch it until I'm ready to watch it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've done that with a number of movies, and sometimes they're not even related to, civil rights or the African American experience. It's just, that I think that just happens at times.
Yes.
But the same thing, I haven't watched Just Mercy. I haven't watched the movie Harriet with Cynthia Evero, and so it's because of everything that's going, just the heaviness of the climate of our world right now. It's tough to watch those movies as entertainment, even though I know they're based off of real life.
Yes, absolutely. And this is not anything to take lightly. So for those of you watching, you're hearing in real time the real thoughts and comments from Curtis Dunlap, somebody who's being honest with you about, hey, this is how I feel about this kind of stuff, and this is how movies actually impact me. Let me talk a little bit, or ask this particular question, because it's an important idea, I think, to get across to folks. Because we live in the visual culture, it seems important that we need to link our thinking and teaching to film. So what are some of the positive values and the negative pitfalls of getting our history from movies? And I know that we've talked a little bit about the negative, so maybe we can go positive however you want to do that. And then, we can talk about how Hollywood might skew the past and things like that. But how should we prepare Christians for this, for the movie watching experience? Because we live in a visual world.
Yeah. So I think there are plenty of positives that exist. One that comes to mind is being able to receive such a large amount of information on a particular topic, or even a particular person or event in history, in the context of story. Which, I love to read, and I know you love to read, but not everybody's going to be able to sit down and read a 1,000-page book that's very, detailed heavy.
Yes.
And so being able to kind of receive, events like that, or through film and movie watching in an hour and a half, for a lot of us, it gives us a taste. It gives us an introduction to the topic. And then it's up to us to continue that study and to continue investigating. But I love how film gives us an introduction and exposes us to particular topics that we otherwise may not have ever come across.
Right.
And so, but I think movies do a great job of being conversation starters, not ending conversations or not giving us a full picture, but they do a good job of helping us start the conversation across the lines, across racial lines, across socioeconomic lines. And so I think it's movies similar to music, I think help us be able to, if we're honest and if we're vulnerable and if we're, if we want to, it gives us an opportunity to have honest discussions with people who typically don't think like us in a common ground place.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So I think that's one of the great things I love about movies.
They really do make us think. In public university where I teach courses on writing, and I introduce every lesson with a film clip. And one of the film clips comes out of the middle of Hurricane with Denzel Washington, a man who's been unjustly accused and in prison. And he's talking about writing with this young man. And I love this line, man. It just captures me so much as a writer, where he says that words are like a fist. That's where the power is in words. And I just love that line. And I really kind of hammer that home when we're talking about writing and the importance of words.
Yeah.
Can you see yourself, or maybe you already do this kind of thing, in sermons and in teaching, incorporating films, or maybe even talking with your audience, your congregation, about how to watch them?
Oh, I do it all the time. Before I was moved into the family life pastor role, I was our student ministries pastor, and I would use movie clips all the time teaching with our youth. I still use it, with our men, as I'm over our men's ministry. I do it in home with our children. Because I'm a big movie watcher, my family has become a big movie watching family.
Nice.
But me and my wife are very keenly aware of how we even help our children to think through what they're watching and help them process through what they're experiencing as they're watching, and how does this apply, especially for us as Christians. And I know not everybody is a Christian, so we have different worldviews, but for us, how do we now take what we're seeing and what we're watching and what we're processing in this film, and how do we view this through a biblical lens in terms of how we think through, how we, engage the world. And so, man, there's plenty of times where we stop a movie midway after a particular scene and we'll have dialogue or conversation, or we'll do so afterwards. And because, movies do help us think about the real world and real world issues. And one of the things you can't do is you can't turn your, even though movies are entertainment, you can't turn your brain off at the door.
That's right.
And so it's so important, especially for us as Christians, to be able to come to the table and to be able to enjoy the movie watching experience, but also to say, like, okay, how does this now apply to the lens through which I see the world as a Christian, as a believer, as one who is called, as one who is Imago Dei and is called to a love other Imago Dei, regardless of how different they are from me. How does it help me to embrace the experiences of others that are very different than mine, that I may never really truly understand? But how do I begin to open my mind to the realities of what the world is like outside of, what I'm comfortable with and outside of my own experience? And so, but I think in order to do that, you have to have a really good grasp on what it looks like to have a biblical lens in the first place. Because I would be remiss to tell somebody to do that and they're unable to really kind of live out walking in a biblical lens on a regular day, even outside of movie watching.
You couldn't ever tell that you're a preacher. I just couldn't ever tell that.
Listen, I'll say this. Me and my friends, we have this ongoing joke. We say, man, you can preach anything. And so, man, there are so many movies. Like, if you were just here in my house, you would catch me beginning sermons, and I'm not a hooper, which is hooping is a Black experience, cultural phenomenon in a traditional Black church. I'm not a hooper, but I practice my hoop when I'm watching movies and I see certain scenes that kind of get me riled up,
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. There are some times when I tell Robin, my wife, baby, I'm going downstairs. I need to watch something blow up.
Yeah. Listen, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. You
Poor
know,
guys, right? There is some testosterone going
there
on
is, there is. I need to go watch 300 or
here. Yeah.
Man on Fire or something.
Oh man, Man on Fire. Oh wow, that's great stuff. You know, we kind of touched on this, but how might we teach classes in our churches on a biblical approach to media itself? You know, teaching them
Yeah.
how to connect to the things that they're seeing, and you know, maybe it's the iPhone, maybe it's the computer, maybe it's the film. But how do we go about teaching people? Maybe we could talk a little bit about the process of how that actually looks in a church.
Yeah, I think the same way that we teach our people how to exegete scripture,
Mm.
we need to teach our people to be able to exegete film.
Oh, amen.
It's very similar. You know, being able to watch a film and see redeemable qualities, and be able to see stories that actually connect to real life, and be
Mm.
able to see biblical principles and themes. Right, that's what the proverb says. The proverb says that wisdom is crying out in the streets.
Yeah.
You know, natural revelation, God's wisdom is built into the fabric of how the world operates.
Mm.
So you know, being able to watch a movie and see how it connects to the gospel, see how it connects to love your neighbor, see how it connects to the need to come alongside side those who are downtrodden and poor, and to protect the widow and the orphan, and to love. And so you know, I think if we take time to actually watch film and not view it as an enemy, but as a resource,
Yes.
then I think we can better utilize some of the clear messages that really do. I mean, in a lot of ways, movies give us easy common ground,
Yes.
have conversations with people in order to share the gospel.
Yes.
You know, like, I mean, you can bring up a movie that many people are familiar with, and if you're able to weave in the gospel, if you're able to point out and identify, you know, key areas of life, and key areas of need, and certain principles, man, I think that's an easy way for conversation. I used to do it all the time with a lot of the Muslim youth who would come
Mm.
from the neighborhood to our Bible studies, and we would show movie clips, and of course, you know, a movie clip is
Got a bit of a technical difficulty here. Hang in there with us. Uh, Curtis just texted me and said they lost power in the thunderstorm they're having out there at his house. What a bummer. We just had one of those here pass through Indiana. I'll wait a couple seconds to see if Curtis can join us again. Let me just shoot him a quick text about that, and let him know that yeah, uh, we got that and understand. So one of the things that just thrills my soul, quite frankly, I'll just follow up with a few minutes here of thoughts, kind of piggybacking on all of Curtis's wonderful statements. I just love anybody who says they exegete film. I just love that, because that's exactly right. We exegete culture, we exegete the scriptures, we help ourselves to understand these things. This is something that's really powerful to us, and something obviously that Curtis is doing in its home. He emphasized that. Boy, I wish more dads would do stuff like that, watch film with their little ones. And then, of course, as a pastor, he's doing this within the community that he serves. And this is a marvelous thing to have young people and older people help them to understand the culture in which they live in a way that helps them to understand how to live in this life that they have. So all of these wonderful comments that he was making, and quite frankly, if you just want to go back, because all these things will be archived and you can watch them over and over again to catch some of these first 22 minutes or so before Curtis's power went out at his house, just to highlight some of those wonderful statements and the importance of what he was saying of watching film. And of course, as we began to talk about the importance of watching white people watching black film, this is really an important concept. Maybe I'll just run down a few comments or a few movies that I just jotted down for myself. And again, within the context of what Curtis was talking about, this is really important. His comments were that these kinds of movies tire him out, and that he just sometimes can't bear in his own person, in his own spirit, to watch some of these things. And I fully appreciate those kinds of emotions, certainly not from his experience. But I wanted to make a comment or two about some of the movies that I think were really important. I think about Sidney Poitier, whose perspective on film and his acting ability in movies like In the Heat of the Night were very groundbreaking films. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, another one, To Sir with Love, The Lilies in the Field. Sidney Poitier stands as one of the greats that I think we really need to highlight. The Color Purple with Oprah, Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, Ray with Jamie Foxx. Oh my word, as Ray Charles, he was just an amazing figure there in that biography. Get a chance to go back to watch some of what Curtis was saying. We'll try to bring this back around again outside of a thunderstorm so that we can actually have more conversation with Curtis about this. I think this is going to be one of those ongoing kinds of thematic ideas that we want to approach. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate the fact that you hung in there with us. We don't have any control over thunderstorms, but we're grateful that you could join us here tonight. We got about 22 minutes in before that happened. So again, grateful for your presence tonight. Thanks ever so much for being here, and watch for new discussion points. We're going to have one this coming week with my friend Eric Redman at Moody Bible Institute. Will be here with us. Dan mentions that Curtis is fantastic. Bring him back. Love to hear some more from him. Here's Hunter Williams asking, can we have a list of films requiring exegesis? Oh my, we could go on and on about movies. Just for the fact of saying this, I actually wrote a book on film called When the Lights Go Down, Movie Review It's Christian Practice. So if you're at all interested in such things, you can go any place to my Amazon author page if you'd like, Mark D. Eckel, and find some of the books that I've written there. But that's one of them, When the Lights Go Down, Movie Review as Christian Practice. So if you're interested in film and talk more about that. But we will have him back. Dan, thanks for mentioning that. Certainly bring Curtis back. Want to hear from him again. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. Technical difficulties, thunderstorms aside, we're grateful for the conversation. And we'll talk to you again next time on Monday with Eric Redman. And we're going to be hearing from a Moody Bible Institute prof talk about his book, Say It, and the importance of African American preaching in the church today. We'll see you then.